A year on, the victims of Grenfell are remembered. In the shadow of the tower block, those who lost their family, friends and neighbours fell silent together, then held a church service for the 72 who died in the fire.
Those who we have physically lost will never, ever, ever be forgotten.
The Queen paid her own tribute, going green for Grenfell as she joined mourners across the country. Also on the programme, 4,600 jobs go at Rolls-Royce and
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale at Grenfell Tower.
Good evening from West London, where victims and survivors of the Grenfell disaster were remembered and honoured on this, the first anniversary of the fire. Hundreds of mourners joined residents in pausing for 72 seconds of silence, one for each of the lives lost. Their names were then read out at the foot of the tower. Silent tributes were held right across the country. And beneath the dignity and the respect, there was the enduring demand for justice. And we will have more on that in just a moment. But in the first of our reports this evening, here's Paul Davis on how the Grenfell disaster was remembered 1 year on.
Survivors, bereaved families, and hundreds of people who just wanted to show their support gathered in the shadow of the tower that became a grave, to remember those lost that dreadful night 12 months ago. "72 seconds silence, a second for every life."
Mary Mendy, Khadija Say.
Each of those lost remembered by name in church services around the tower. At Fire Brigade headquarters, they shared the loss they tried but were unable to prevent.
A minute's silence, colleagues.
Parliamentary business was paused out of respect. Royal business too, the Queen and the Duchess of Sussex remembering Grenfell in Chester. Commemorations had begun much earlier. The ruined tower illuminated in green at the exact time flames were lighting the skyline a year ago. Other buildings also bathed in the colour chosen to represent this community. Even the lights on the London Eye switched to green. Along with Downing Street, still dealing with the issues that Grenfell has highlighted. There have been dozens of events throughout the day, including a silent march through the streets that are still dominated by the tower. And the symbolic release of white doves. The mood sombre, respectful, yet determined with one clear aim.
Those who we have physically lost will never, ever, ever be forgotten. And it is incumbent on each and every one of us that we ensure that they are never forgotten.
At the foot of the tower, high-profile supporters of the Grenfell cause like singer Adele and the rapper Stormzy joined a gospel choir in an emotional rendition of Lean On Me.
You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just
community still grieving, but leaning on each other and finding comfort and strength in that. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Well, despite the promises made to the survivors, a year on, only 83 households have moved into permanent homes. 120 families are still living in emergency or temporary accommodation. Adding to their anguish is the mental trauma they suffer. Many of them feel guilty for being the ones who made it out alive. Sejal Karia heard the survivors' stories.
This is the last time Alain Machette de Messi hosted Christmas in her flat in Grenfell Tower. 6 months later, her home and virtually everything in it was gone forever.
Yeah, it was a place I really loved and I had peace in that place.
On the night of the fire, she escaped with her life, but little else.
I cried when they brought back to me. It has my father's name on it, D and G.
A ring belonging to her father, who died 3 years ago, withstood the intensity of the blaze. It was among the few possessions returned to her from her 12th floor flat, where she'd been trapped for more than 2 hours when the fire broke out. During her last 999 call, the warning from the operator was stark.
And it said, if you don't leave now, you are going to die there. That was very, very frightening. We were choked, we were coughing, and then I heard, a bang. It's a very faint bang, and the firefighters were there.
She was among the last survivors to escape the tower alive. A year on, she's focusing on her personal journey of healing.
I don't want to go on feeling bitter. It's time just to look forward to the future, and that's what I wish for everybody.
For Sid Aliat Mani, that's not so easy.
We shouldn't talk about it as we move on. We shouldn't talk about it, get over it. We have to start thinking about the future, how people can be secured in other buildings.
He survived after escaping his flat on the 15th floor.
When I looked back, I saw the fire, I was paralyzed. You realize there is people still inside, and then you start to see there's people on the window. They can't go out.
12 months later, he's still asking why.
What I think I can't understand, how I made it and how my next door didn't. 22nd floor, they made it, even if it was late time, they made it, and the neighbor didn't.
You feel that you shouldn't have survived it?
Because you have been broken. It's not just a breakdown, you have been damaged from inside.
At the foot of the tower, Sid shows me the many tributes he passes every day on his way to work, daily reminders of those who didn't survive. He tells me they haunt him.
All the dreams have been taken away. They have the right to be alive.
He's angry too.
They put their lives on risk, and that because of their ignorance, this is the price.
His mission is that from the ashes of Grenfell, truth and justice will prevail. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
On the 14th day of every month since the fire, the community here has held a silent march. It's in tribute to the victims, but it's also a movement to ensure that they get justice. Martha Fair is at the Methodist Church near here, where the marchers meet every month. And Martha, tonight's event will have added significance, won't it?
Yes, it will. And as you can see, many people have turned out this evening just a few hundred yards away from Grenfell Tower to take part in the silent march, which starts at 7 o'clock. It's been happening, as you say, on the 14th of every month. It began with a group of just 40 or 50 people who came together to pay their respects as they walked silently through the streets. But it has become something which has enabled a community that felt voiceless to also demonstrate its frustrations and its feelings in a very powerful and dignified way as they walk carrying banners and placards. And as you can see tonight, there are estimated to be about 5,000 people turning out for this march, many of them wearing green scarves, wearing green hearts, carrying those placards, a community that's uniting to remember the events of a year ago.
Martha Fairley, thank you. Now, the disaster prompted calls for root and branch reform of building regulations to prevent combustible cladding being used again. But so far, there's been no outright ban on such materials. Figures from the government show that 311 buildings, many of them high-rises, still have cladding that is unlikely to meet current building guidance. And that's left many of those residents feeling unsafe. Damon Green reports on the ongoing safety fears.
In the centre of Manchester, an 18-storey residential block, smart and desirable, part of what developers describe as the Green Quarter. But it's a year since residents of Cypress Place watched the tragedy of Grenfell unfold, only to discover their homes are covered in the same materials, cladding which an inquiry has been told is deadly.
It's more flammable than petrol. I mean, this stuff, everyone remembers those images. That stuff's on this building, and you know, we're going to wait another year until it's even removed.
Fire experts agreed that the cladding covering 300 homes needed to come off straight away, but the company that owns the freehold of the building this week took residents to a tribunal, arguing it's down to them to pay the £3 million cost. They say, we regard the safety of the residents as of paramount importance. The ongoing tribunal will provide an independent view on the responsibility for the cladding's replacement costs. Buildings constructed with the same materials aren't hard to find. Landmark House in the centre of Bradford is one of them. Although the building's owners told ITV News they think the government should fund the refurbishment, here again it's down to leaseholders to pay £10,000 each for recladding. Tim, who owns a flat here, says he can't believe it.
I feel outraged that we're in this position. I feel outraged that the building's still got dangerous cladding on and that we're having to pay for that, replacing ultimately, and pay for the walk-in watch. It's ridiculous.
We can't remortgage, we can't sell. The property has obviously dropped in value because we can't sell it.
As time passes since Grenfell and nothing is done, the uncertainty is affecting lives, costing people money to live in homes where they don't feel safe. Damon Green, ITV News, in Manchester.
Later in the programme, I'll be meeting the designers of a memorial mosaic, helping to bring different parts of this community together. And that was unveiled this morning. That and the rest of the day's news after the break. Join me then. Hello again, welcome back to West London. We're going to move on to the rest of the day's news now. The engine maker Rolls-Royce has confirmed it's cutting 4,500 workers, with most of them coming from the UK. The job losses will fall heavily on managers and administrators at its plant in Derby. Ben Chapman is there tonight. So Ben, what's been the reaction there?
Well, the Unite Union has described these job losses as deeply unsettling, with what it says potentially dire consequences for a community here which relies so heavily on Rolls-Royce. This is an absolutely enormous site employing close to 16,000 people, famous for making aircraft engines. And while this time last year the company said it was going to protect frontline engineering jobs, today it was the back office staff, the administrators, the middle managers who found out that they instead would be affected. 3,000 job losses are expected in the UK. The vast majority of those, we understand, will be here in Derby, and it's a decision the chief executive said today was very difficult.
Many of them have worked for Rolls-Royce for a long time. Their parents, even their grandparents, have worked for Rolls-Royce, and we are acutely aware of the strong link between Rolls-Royce and Derby. However, that awareness makes me think that we absolutely need to secure the future of Rolls-Royce in Derby.
Well, he says this company just has to become more efficient if it is to stay competitive. But in a city that has had such close links to this company for well over a century, the sheer number of these job losses will be felt very hard indeed.
Ben Chapman in Derby, thank you. Now, the government has confirmed it is relaxing immigration rules to allow more foreign doctors and nurses to work in the NHS. They'll be excluded from a cap introduced by Theresa May when she was Home Secretary that limits the number of non-EU skilled workers allowed into the country. And 4 people smugglers have been jailed for 25 years in Hungary for their part in the deaths of 71 migrants who suffocated in a lorry 3 years ago. Victims from Afghanistan, Syria and Iraq were among the dead, found inside an abandoned lorry in 2015. Now, there was a dream start for Russia's World Cup today, with the hosts winning their opening match in style. They beat Saudi Arabia by 5-0. It followed an opening ceremony where a famous Englishman made a star turn. Emma Murphy reports. Now, as you saw earlier, the Queen and the new Duchess of Sussex paused in silence to remember the victims of the Grenfell disaster today. It came during Meghan Markle's first solo visit with the Queen since she became part of the royal family. And as our royal editor Chris Shipp reports from Cheshire, Meghan is still learning the ropes.
It was a day of new experiences for the Duchess of Sussex, and it began with a sleepover on the royal train to Runcorn. The Queen, you will note, had chosen today to wear green, her personal tribute to Grenfell.
Meghan, Meghan, Meghan Queen!
And then it was time to be shown the royal ropes. First stop, opening a bridge. Today's was one across the Mersey. You could call it a training course, and the leader was Meghan's grandmother-in-law, or as her family call her on official duties, the boss. But that doesn't mean you can't have some fun on the job, or that the boss wouldn't be unpredictable. First you don't know which car door to use, and then you find the Queen has shuffled along the seat. Safely in the car they moved to Chester, where it would be fair to say there were a few people waiting. And what the Queen did on one side of the street, the Duchess was doing on the other.
What do you think it was?
Induction.
An induction.
Yeah. It was very much, this is how you do things.
Here's a plaque. Here's how you open a bridge.
Yeah, yeah. Who better to learn off than the Queen?
So bridges opened, plaques unveiled, crowds waved to. The only thing missing was planting a tree, but that will surely come. Chris Shipp, ITV News, Cheshire.
We end this special programme with events here in West London on the first anniversary of the Grenfell Tower disaster. Earlier today, a mosaic was unveiled at the base of the building. It was created by residents and neighbours, young and old, and features a series of interlocking green hearts forming the centre of a flower. Petals will be added to it over the coming year. It was organised by the local Al-Manar Mosque. And the woman behind the idea told me how it shows the beauty of small things coming together for the greater good and underlines the Grenfell spirit.
We've got the little mosaic pieces coming together to form something really, really beautiful.
The green is very important for Grenfell.
To reflect the remarkable community spirit that emerged a year ago, one volunteer decided to do something unique.
It was just an artistic way to represent what we were all doing. You know, you've got the interlocking arms, and essentially it was almost like we were forming human chains in those early days. You know, you were passing boxes along and passing bottles of water, and it was just some way of giving people a chance to take part in something really beautiful.
Something positive.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
To grow out of that terrible tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something forward-looking and hopeful.
I mean, it's literally actually little pieces, isn't it?
It is.
It's the
It's
community,
these tiny little pieces,
all coming together.
All these different people coming together to produce something beautiful.
I think it was your wonderful idea that each different community group would actually make their own mosaic.
You're stood there watching this tower engulfed in flames and not being able to do anything about it. Being able to come together, it's almost quite a therapeutic space. Eventually it will grow because there'll be a petal that will be unveiled every month, which will eventually go to different community centres.
There it is.
For now, Ismahan and Emily are happy that the mosaic is being presented to the community as a sign of solidarity. A year on, they've gone from feeling helpless to hopeful.
Disaster shouldn't have to happen for people to show that outpouring of love and affection, but I think that's something that will change. I think this community has changed. We'll look out for our neighbours and our friends, near and far.
We close tonight remembering the 72 people who died in the Grenfell Tower disaster. Among them were many children. 18 died. The youngest, Logan Gomez, was stillborn after his parents escaped the flames. Brothers and sisters perished together. like Mirna, Fatima and Zaymad Chukar. The tower was home to many young people just starting to make their way in life. 24-year-old Khadija Say was a promising artist and photographer. Architects Marco Gottardi and his partner Gloria Trevisan were building their careers and their future together. The victims came from all ages and all backgrounds. 63-year-old Raymond Bernard, known as Moses to his friends, had moved from Trinidad in 1969. Maria del Pilar Burton became the fire's final official victim when she died of her injuries in January. The loss of all those precious lives still reverberates. Every one of them remains in the hearts of this remarkable community. From me and all the team here, good night.